The day Sarah discovered the family calendar was the day something broke inside her for good. She'd be looking for her mother's phone number to reschedule a cardiology appointment. Her third attempt this week, when she saw it hanging in the kitchen, covered in her mother's meticulous handwriting. Every single one of Emma's training sessions was marked in bright purple ink, complete with little stars and inspirational quotes. State finals prep took up an entire week's worth of space in bold letters. Her own surgery date, just 2 weeks away, was squeezed into the corner of Thursday the 17th in plain blue ballpoint. S. Hospital. Like a dental cleaning or an oil change. Something routine, forgettable. Sarah traced her finger over the words, remembering how her mother used to mark her piano recitals with musical note doodles and exclamation points. That was before Emma had come into their lives 3 years ago, before gymnastics consumed every corner of their family's existence. The sound of the front door opening made her jump. Her father walked in, phone pressed to his ear, deep in conversation about Emma's potential athletic scholarship. He gave Sarah a distracted wave before heading straight to his home office. Through the thin walls, she could hear him enthusiastically discussing training schedules and competition strategies with Emma's coach. This was the same father who had accidentally scheduled 3 work calls during her pre-op consultation yesterday. The same father who had once never missed a single one of her performances. Sarah opened the medicine cabinet, reaching for her heart medication, only to find an empty bottle. Her mother had forgotten to pick up the refill again, despite Sarah's daily reminders. But there, right next to the empty prescription bottle, sat Emma's perfectly organized supplement regimen. Protein powders, vitamins, and electrolyte tablets, all neatly labeled with precise dosing instructions. Later that evening, Sarah sat at the dinner table, pushing food around her plate, while her mother fussed over Emma's pre-competition diet plan. "Mom," Sarah interrupted quietly, "I need someone to drive me to my cardiology appointment tomorrow. Grandmother's car is in the shop." "Oh, honey, tomorrow's impossible," her mother replied, not looking up from measuring Emma's portion of grilled chicken. "Emma has her final costume fitting, and then we need to meet with the sports nutritionist." "It's about my surgery," Sarah pressed, her voice catching. "The doctor needs to discuss the risks and—" "Sarah, you know how important these next few weeks are for your sister," her father cut in. "The Scouts will be at state finals. This could determine her entire future." Asterisk, "And what about my future?" Asterisk, Sarah wanted to scream. Asterisk, "What about my chance of surviving this surgery?" Asterisk, instead, she pushed back her chair and walked upstairs, the sound of her parents discussing Emma's beam routine floating up behind her. In her room, Sarah opened her laptop and began documenting everything, every missed appointment, every forgotten medication, every dismissed concern. She didn't know why she was keeping the record, but something in her gut told her she needed to. Her grandmother had always said that patterns tell stories. This pattern was telling a story Sarah wasn't sure she could bear to read. Room 407 of Metro General Hospital seemed designed to amplify loneliness. Sarah watched the shadows from the IV pole dance across the mint green walls as evening settled in, her phone constantly lighting up with Instagram notifications. Her mother's latest post showed Emma executing a perfect split leap. Captioned, "Last practice before finals." Hashtag proud gymnastics mom, hashtag Rotor State. The post had already garnered dozens of comments from their mother's gymnastics parent friends. None of them mentioned that her other daughter was about to undergo life-threatening surgery in the morning. Sarah's dinner, hospital chicken and overcooked vegetables, sat untouched on the rolling tray. She couldn't eat anyway. The pre-surgery instructions specified nothing after 8 p.m. Her mother had texted earlier, "Emma's having visualization training with Coach Lisa until 9. We'll try to stop by after if we're not too tired. Get some rest, sweetie." The nurse Maria came in to check her vitals for the 100th time. She frowned at Sarah's elevated heart rate. "Try to stay calm, honey. Is someone coming to stay with you tonight?" "My grandmother," Sarah answered, not mentioning that her parents had chosen to attend Emma's late-night practice session instead. Maria's expression softened with understanding, and she squeezed Sarah's hand before leaving. At 10:23 p.m., Another notification, a family group chat message from her father. Emma's front aerial sequence is competition ready. Video attached. Sarah watched the clip, remembering how she used to play piano accompaniment for Emma's floor routines before everything changed. The irony wasn't lost on her. Tomorrow, she'd be the one performing, except her routine would be choreographed by surgeons. And a mistake wouldn't just mean a deduction in points. The silence of the room was broken by the gentle ping of her phone. For a moment, hope fluttered in her chest. But it was just her mother again. Emma's having trouble sleeping, so nervous about tomorrow. Can you send her a good luck text? She needs all the support she can get. Sarah stared at the message until her vision blurred with tears. Her hands shook as she typed out a response she'd never sent. I have a 13% chance of dying tomorrow. But sure, let's all worry about Emma's optional dismount. At 11:47 p.m., the door creaked open. Her grandmother shuffled in, still wearing her work clothes, hospital visitor's badge crooked on her cardigan. She carried a paper bag that smelled suspiciously like the bubble tea Sarah wasn't supposed to have before surgery. I know, her grandmother said, seeing Sarah's expression. But I figured rules were made to be broken on nights like these. She settled into the uncomfortable visitor's chair, her joints creaking in protest. Besides, I won't tell if you won't. For the first time that day, Sarah felt her shoulders relax. Her grandmother reached over and took her hand, her palm warm and weathered. Neither of them mentioned the obvious absences in the room. Instead, her grandmother pulled out a deck of cards, and they played gin rummy until Sarah's eyes grew heavy, the steady beeping of monitors creating a strange lullaby for what might be her last night alive. 3 days after her surgery, Sarah's parents finally made their grand entrance. Her father carried a bouquet of pink roses, the same ones he always bought Emma before competitions, while her mother clutched Emma's gold medal, apparently unable to leave it at home for even an hour. The medal caught the afternoon light as she nervously twisted its ribbon between her fingers. Look who's here to see you, her mother chirped with forced cheerfulness. Emma wanted to come, but she has a photo shoot with the local paper. Isn't that exciting? Sarah watched them arrange themselves around her hospital bed, noting how they carefully avoided looking at the monitors, the IV lines, the evidence of how close they'd come to losing her. Her father set the roses next to the peace lilies from the OR team, which had been joined by potted plants from 3 different nurses, and a card signed by the entire ICU staff. The doctors say you're doing well, her father commented, checking his phone. Should be home in time to see Emma's routine at regionals next month. Something snapped inside Sarah. Maybe it was the painkillers wearing off, or the memory of coding on the operating table, or just the accumulated weight of years of being an afterthought in her own family. She pushed herself up straighter, ignoring the burning pain in her chest. My heart stopped for 45 seconds, she said, her voice raspy but steady. Did you know that? Of course not. You had your phones off for Emma's bean routine. Her mother's hand flew to her throat. Sarah, sweetie, Don't sweetie me. Sarah cut her off. I almost died. I literally died on that table. And you couldn't even answer your phones. She reached for her own phone, hands shaking. Want to know what I did while I was waiting for surgery? I went through my photos. Found this one from last year. She held up a picture of Emma's first competition with their family. See how you're both there front row? Know where I was? Playing piano accompaniment for her routine. Because even when I was terrified about my upcoming cardiac tests, you still made me perform for Emma's big day. Her father's coffee cup slipped from his hand, dark liquid spreading across the linoleum floor like spilled secrets. That's not fair, he started. Emma's future. What about my future? Sarah's heart monitor began beeping faster. Or did you think my death would just give Emma a tragic backstory for her floor routine? The grieving champion, performing in memory of her sister. That would look great on her college applications, right? The silence that followed was deafening. Through the glass walls, Sarah could see nurses watching, ready to intervene if her vitals spiked too high. Her mother had gone pale, the gold medal hanging limply from her fingers. We love you both equally, her mother whispered. Sarah laughed, a harsh sound that pulled at her stitches. No, you don't. And I have proof. She pointed to her laptop, where she documented every missed appointment, every forgotten medication, every dismissed concern. I've been keeping track. Would you like to see the spreadsheet? Consciousness returned to Sarah like static on an old TV, in fragments, buzzing, and unclear. The IQ's fluorescent lights pierced through her eyelids, and somewhere nearby, a monitor beeped in rhythm with her newly repaired heart. Her throat felt raw from the intubation tube they'd just removed, and every breath brought a deep, aching pain in her chest. Her grandmother's lavender perfume cut through the antiseptic hospital smell. "Is my brave girl," she whispered, squeezing Sarah's hand. "You gave us quite a scare." Sarah tried to speak, but only managed a dry rasp. Her grandmother offered her ice chips, carefully spooning them between her cracked lips. Through the fog of post-operative drugs, Sarah noticed the redness around her grandmother's eyes, the way her usually neat silver hair had come undone. "How?" Sarah managed to croak. 8 hours. Her grandmother answered the unfinished question. "There were complications." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Your heart stopped for a while, sweetheart. The doctors tried to reach your parents, but," as if on cue, Sarah's phone lit up on the bedside table. Her grandmother picked it up, her expression tightening as she read the screen. It was a family group chat message from her mother. "Emma did it. First place in beam and floor. Video attached. Heart emojis. Also, Sarah's surgery went fine. She's in recovery now. We'll visit tomorrow after Emma's press interviews." The message was followed by a flood of congratulatory responses from relatives, all focused on Emma's victory. Only Aunt Linda, her mother's youngest sister, replied, "What about Sarah? Is she okay?" 3 minutes passed before her mother responded. "Doctors said everything's stable. Now wait until you see Emma's scoring breakdown." Sarah closed her eyes, hot tears sliding down her cheeks. Her grandmother quietly wiped them away, careful of the oxygen tube under her nose. Through the ICU's glass walls, they could see nurses at their station, several of whom kept glancing their way with poorly concealed concern. Later, Sarah would learn that they'd been discussing her case, not just her medical crisis, but the conspicuous absence of her parents during her near-death experience. "Nai-nai," Sarah whispered, using the Chinese term for grandmother she hadn't used since childhood. "Did they even try to come?" Her grandmother's silence was answer enough. She busied herself adjusting Sarah's blankets, but her hands trembled slightly. "Your mother texted that Emma was too anxious to perform without them there. They thought since you were in good hands." The pain medication was wearing off, but Sarah couldn't tell which hurt more, her sutured chest or her shattered heart. On the windowsill, someone had placed a small pot of peace lilies. The card attached read, "From the OR team, you're stronger than you know." Sarah stared at those flowers until her vision blurred, thinking how strangers had shown more concern for her life than her own parents. Her grandmother began humming softly, an old Chinese lullaby she used to sing when Sarah was small. But they both knew some wounds couldn't be soothed away with ancient melodies. 6 months after Sarah's surgery, the community center auditorium hummed with anticipation. Sarah sat at the grand piano, her fingers hovering over the keys, the scar on her chest hidden beneath a midnight blue dress. This time, her heart raced with excitement rather than arrhythmia. In the front row, her parents sat with their phones turned off and stored away, a new family rule that had emerged from their therapy sessions. Her grandmother sat beside them, beaming with pride and the quiet satisfaction of watching her family slowly knit itself back together. This wasn't just any performance. It was Emma's first showcase in stepping back from competitive gymnastics. She had chosen to create an artistic routine that told their story, not of rivalry, but of sisterhood and healing. Sarah would provide the live accompaniment, a piece they had composed together during her recovery. As Sarah began to play, Emma stepped onto the floor. Gone was the sparkly competition leotard, replaced by a simple costume that matched Sarah's dress. The melody started soft and broken, like a heart struggling to beat, then gradually grew stronger. Emma's movements echoed the music, her gymnastic skills now serving art rather than scores, telling their story through motion. Their mother watched with tears in her eyes, but for once, she wasn't documenting every moment through her phone. Instead, she held their father's hand, both of them fully present. The spreadsheet of missed appointments and forgotten medications had been transformed into a new family calendar, where everyone's events held equal weight. Sarah's cardiac checkups were marked with the same care as Emma's dance classes, which had replaced her grueling gymnastics schedule. Emma's routine reached its climax as Sarah's music swelled. The moment that once would have been a competition-perfect dismount became instead a gesture of connection. Emma turning toward the piano, reaching out as Sarah played the notes that represented her heart stopping and restarting. The audience held its breath, understanding the story being told. In the final moments, Emma moved to the piano, and Sarah played with one hand while taking her sister's hand with the other. The music faded to a gentle pulse, like a steady heartbeat. When they finished, the silence held for a moment before the audience erupted in applause. Their father was the first to stand, not with the desperate enthusiasm of a parent seeking validation through their child's performance, but with the genuine pride of seeing both his daughters healing and growing. Their mother joined him, no longer comparing or calculating, simply loving. Later, at the small celebration in their backyard, Sarah watched her family with new eyes. Her grandmother served her famous dumplings, while Emma excitedly discussed the dance studio where she'd started teaching younger kids. Their parents moved through the space differently now, more attentive, more aware, asking questions, and really listening to the answers. The scar on Sarah's chest had faded to a thin silver line, much like the barriers between her and her family. Some days were still hard. Some therapy sessions still ended in tears. But they were learning to see each other, to hear each other, to hold space for each other's pain and dreams. As the evening light softened, Sarah sat at their old upright piano, Emma perched beside her on the bench. Their parents paused their conversation to listen, not out of obligation, but out of love. Sarah smiled as her fingers found the keys. They were composing a new song now, all of them together, and this time, every note would be heard.